Imagine a life so perfectly constructed, so flawlessly expansive, that your destiny is measured in assets and zeros. For Daphne Hayes, life was a Manhattan penthouse, a 20-carat diamond, and a wedding that would secure her fiancé Julian's billion-dollar legacy. But what happens when perfection is a lie? Everything shatters the moment Daphne finds herself covered in mud at a run-down animal shelter, falling for Leo, the hard-working, debt-ridden veterinarian whose only wealth is his integrity. When Julian discovers her secret, he doesn't just get jealous, he gets calculated. He unleashes his ultimate weapon, a six-figure secret, a $600,000 clinic endowment offered as blackmail to force her back to the altar. Daphne must make the impossible choice: sacrifice her honest love to save Leo's life's work, or walk away from the wealth forever and choose a future built on nothing but faith and a leaky roof. Get ready for The Six-Figure Secret. This is the true story of how one woman left her gilded cage behind and discovered that the most priceless things in life are the ones you can't buy. You won't believe what she chose. Chapter 1. The air in the penthouse, 300 feet above the frantic, beating heart of the city, was always scented with expensive lilies and a faint, crisp undertone of anxiety. For Daphne Hayes, it was the only air she had ever truly known. Her fiancé, Julian Thorne, managed a hedge fund so exclusive, its name was only whispered among a certain echelon of Manhattan society, and their life together was a meticulously curated museum of expectation. Tonight, the expectation was a dinner party, a prelude to the impending announcement of their engagement gala, and Daphne felt as polished and as lifeless as the Italian marble countertop reflecting the crystal chandelier above. Julian was objectively perfect. His tailored suit was a second skin, his dark hair was impeccably groomed, and his conversation flowed with the effortless, cool confidence of a man who measured his worth in nine-figure returns. He spoke now of the guest list for the gala, flicking through names on his tablet with the detachment of a curator reviewing inventory. The Witherspoons confirmed, of course, and I've secured Senator Davies for the toast. He owes me a favor after the Q3 maneuver, Julian commented, his voice smooth and low, never quite loud enough to disturb the perfect stillness of the room. Your mother specifically requested the seating chart to ensure she's near the new French ambassador, Daphne. I've put a note in. Don't forget to mention the vintage of Bordeaux. She loves it when you show a little engagement in the details. Daphne managed a small, practiced smile. Of course, Julian. The 89, I remember. She swirled the ice in her glass of mineral water, feeling the cool condensation against her palm. She had spent the last 7 years of her young adult life training for this role. The flawless society bride, the capable, elegant partner to a man destined for the cover of Forbes. Her own job, though prestigious, a lead role in mergers and acquisitions at a top consulting firm, was merely a necessary accessory, a testament to her pedigree and ability to manage complexity, preparing her for the far more complex management of Julian's life. Lately, however, the complexity had curdled into a suffocating, unbearable simplicity. Everything was predictable, everything was planned, and nothing, absolutely nothing, was real. The heavy mahogany dining room doors swung open, and Mrs. Hayes, Daphne's mother, swept in, an aurora of expensive silk and disapproval preceding her. Mr. Hayes followed, a quiet, powerful man whose silence spoke volumes, usually volumes dedicated to stock market fluctuations and corporate governance. They were the architects of Daphne's life, and Julian was their masterwork. Daphne, darling, you look pale. Did you remember your appointment with the wellness guru? You simply must be radiant for the engagement portraits. And Julian, have you secured the string quartet from Vienna? Nothing less than authentic old-world charm will do for the reception.
The conversation immediately submerged Daphne in a sea of logistics, venue options, floral budgets in the astronomical range, and the subtle politics of who received an invitation and who was relegated to the status of a mere acquaintance. Daphne contributed mechanically, nodding at the appropriate times, repeating the required phrases about being thrilled and so excited. But beneath the placid surface of her composure, a small, fierce rebellion was starting to brew, a hot, disruptive ember that had been lit a few weeks prior during a particularly grueling 90-hour work week that had culminated in a panic attack in the executive bathroom. That week, she had closed a deal that would net her company millions, yet she felt utterly empty. The pressure to maintain her six-figure salary, her flawless social calendar, and the role of Julian's perfect counterpoint had become a physical weight. She hadn't been able to sleep for weeks, and the only genuine smile she had managed to produce was the one she gave to a scruffy three-legged terrier she had passed on a street corner being walked by an elderly man. That small, genuine interaction, the dog's hopeful, trusting eyes, had cracked the polished veneer of her existence. Now, as Julian smoothly navigated her father through a complex discussion on international debt restructuring, Daphne looked out the panoramic window. Far below, tiny specks moved. Cars, people, flashes of green from a small city park. She wondered what it felt like to be one of those specks. Unburdened by Austrian string quartets and senatorial favors, she wondered what it felt like to make a mistake without it costing millions in reputation damage. "We've decided on the theme, Daphne," Mrs. Hayes announced, pulling her back to the marble table. "A Midsummer Night's Dream. Very ethereal, very classic. Julian has kindly agreed to handle the final negotiations with the florist. Their initial quote was simply unacceptable for a party of this magnitude." Daphne blinked, the words seeming distant and muffled. A Midsummer Night's Dream. Illusion, deception, falling in love with donkeys. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. "Daphne," Julian prompted gently, noticing her lapse. His hand covered hers briefly, a proprietary, cool touch. "Are you all right, my dear? You seem distracted." "I'm fine," she said, pulling her hand back almost imperceptibly. "I had a thought about work. A big one." It wasn't a thought. It was a decision, forged in the heat of her despair and the cold isolation of her perfection. The realization was terrifying, yet immediately profoundly liberating. The anxiety that had been her constant companion for months suddenly receded, replaced by a crystalline clarity. "I'm quitting my job," she announced, the words surprisingly steady, cutting through the low hum of conversation and the clinking of expensive cutlery.
The silence that followed was not merely an absence of sound. It was a vacuum, immediate and absolute. Mr. Hayes froze mid-sip of his Bordeaux. Mrs. Hayes's expression shifted instantly from serene disapproval to outright horrified shock. Julian, for the first time Daphne had ever seen, looked genuinely, completely thrown. His perfect composure wavered, his mouth slightly open. "I beg your pardon, Daphne?" Julian asked, his voice now sharper, a cold edge replacing the smooth veneer. "My job," Daphne repeated, meeting his gaze directly. She saw the calculation in his eyes, not of love, but of social impact, of the immediate damage control needed. "I'm tendering my resignation tomorrow. I'm tired of closing deals that make rich people richer. I want to do something meaningful, something real." Mrs. Hayes finally found her voice, a strangled, high-pitched gasp. "Meaningful? Daphne, darling, you can't be serious. You're at the pinnacle. You're on the fast track to partnership. What would you possibly do that is more meaningful than handling billion-dollar acquisitions?" "I don't know yet," Daphne admitted, the admission feeling reckless and exhilarating. "But I can't do this anymore. The stress, the hours, it's unsustainable." Julian regained his footing instantly, a smooth, practiced mask sliding back into place.
He leaned forward, his tone shifting to gentle, patronizing concern. "Sweetheart, this is just fatigue speaking. You closed the Montrose deal. It was grueling. Why don't you take a 2-week sabbatical? We can fly to Mykonos, clear your head, then you'll see this is just a temporary burnout. We're on a schedule, darling. We can't have unnecessary upheaval right before the gala." His words, intended to soothe and control, only amplified her resolve. He saw her ambition as something disposable, something that could be managed with a trip to the Mediterranean. He didn't see her fear, her exhaustion, or her desperate need for something authentic. "No, Julian, this isn't burnout. This is a fundamental misalignment. I quit. I'm serious. The gala will proceed, but my life, the one I actually live, is changing. I'm going to find something that matters to me." Her parents exchanged a look that conveyed volumes of disappointment, worry about reputation, and a chilling sense of betrayal. Her father placed his napkin neatly beside his plate, a final, decisive action. "Daphne," he said, his voice quiet but authoritative, "you understand the magnitude of this choice. This is not about a job. This is about commitment. To Julian, to this family, to the future you were built for. We expect you to reconsider this folly immediately. Think very carefully about the consequences of damaging your standing and Julian's over a momentary caprice." Daphne stood up, the chair scraping against the marble floor, a loud, defiant noise in the perfect silence. She looked at Julian, seeing the calculation and the deep, wounded pride in his eyes. She knew she was not just quitting a job, she was tearing down the elaborate facade of her entire future, and yet she felt lighter than she had in years. The air, though still scented with lilies, suddenly felt breathable. "My standing is my own, father," she said. Lifting her chin, "I need to breathe my own air for a change." She left the room, the sound of her expensive heels clicking on the floor echoing the pounding of her liberated yet terrified heart. She walked past the walls hung with priceless modern art, past the perfectly arranged bar cart, and out onto the terrace. The city lights sparkled below, no longer symbols of pressure, but of endless, terrifying possibility. She would quit the next day. The gilded cage was about to open. But what would she find on the outside? She stood there for a long time, the cool night air refreshing on her face, the weight of her entire high society life already starting to lift. She knew the consequences would be immense, the confrontations dramatic, but for the first time in memory, she was choosing her, not the expectation. She just needed a place to start, a place where a job was done out of passion, not profit, and where genuine kindness was valued more than a 6-figure annual contribution, a place where things were perhaps a little messy, a little real. The thought of the scruffy terrier and the gentle old man flashed through her mind. The next day, she would begin her search for meaning. The rebellion had officially begun. The consequences, she decided, could wait.
The following morning, the act of quitting was surprisingly swift and anticlimactic. The head of the consulting firm, a man whose only discernible emotion was aggressive efficiency, accepted Daphne's immediate resignation with a curt nod and a look that suggested he'd already calculated the efficiency loss and found it acceptable. Her keys were taken, her severance package was detailed in a dense, multi-page document, and within 2 hours, Daphne Hayes, the rising star of Manhattan acquisitions, was simply Daphne Hayes, a woman with a full bank account and an entirely empty schedule. The finality of the clean break was shocking. Walking out of the skyscraper and onto the sun-drenched street felt like shedding a lead cloak. She was free, but the vast, terrifying expanse of freedom stretched before her, daunting and without a single familiar landmark. Julian, having spent the night processing her declaration through the lens of business strategy, had opted for a calculated retreat. He sent a single text message. "Take a week to rest. We'll discuss this next Saturday. Don't make any rash decisions that affect the gala schedule, darling. J."
His attempt at managing her emotional crisis like a volatile asset only reinforced her need for distance. The gilded cage had briefly opened, and she had flown through the gap without looking back. Daphne spent the rest of the day aimlessly wandering, the sleek tailoring of her designer coat feeling ridiculously out of place amongst the ordinary, hurried rhythm of everyday life. She realized her entire identity was wrapped up in an environment she hated. She didn't know what she liked, what she cared about, or what truly made her happy. That night, she didn't sleep in the Penthouse. She checked into a small, boutique hotel downtown, a place Julian wouldn't think to look. And for the first time, she slept deeply, a dreamless, restorative sleep that felt like a quiet act of rebellion. The next morning, armed with a sudden, decisive impulse, she pulled out her phone. She Googled, "meaningful volunteer work, Manhattan." The search results were predictable. Hospitals, museums, soup kitchens. But halfway down the list was a link with a charming, slightly blurry photo of a golden retriever puppy. Hope's Haven Animal Shelter. Adopt, donate, volunteer. The name resonated instantly. It wasn't about prestige, it was about genuine, essential care. It was exactly the kind of messy, unglamorous, and desperately important work she craved. The shelter, nestled on the edge of a less polished district of the city, was a world away from the pristine glass and steel she knew. The exterior was brick, slightly worn with paint peeling near the edges, and the air was thick with the honest, earthy smell of wet dog, disinfectant, and hay. It was chaos, but a vital, necessary chaos. She stepped inside, her cashmere sweater and perfectly cut trousers feeling like a costume. The main reception area was bustling, a whirlwind of yapping dogs, ringing phones, and people in jeans and work boots moving with purpose. She approached a woman at the desk who was simultaneously filling out a form, answering a phone, and swatting away the insistent tail of a large, friendly Labrador. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sounding unnaturally refined. "I saw your listing online. I'd like to volunteer." The woman, whose name tag read Patrice, didn't look up immediately. "Fill out a form, first-timer? Great. Forms are on the clipboard. We need hands for kennel cleaning, dog walking, and maybe some socializing for the shy cats. Long-term commitment preferred. It's hard work, sweetie, not just cuddling." Daphne felt a flicker of offense, quickly swallowed by a wave of humility. Patrice was right. This was real work, not a society photo op. Daphne took the clipboard, her manicured fingers gripping the rough plastic, and began filling out the form. Under relevant experience, she stared at the blank line. Managing a $50 million account? Negotiating corporate buyouts? She simply wrote, "Eager to learn. Available daily." After a short, no-nonsense orientation from Patrice that consisted mainly of warnings about aggressive terriers and the proper dilution ratios for cleaning solutions, Daphne was handed a pair of oversized rubber boots and a surprisingly heavy bucket. Her task? The immediate cleaning of the small dog wing. The work was immediately humbling. It was smelly, physically demanding, and far removed from the complex but clean tasks of her old life. She scrubbed floors, changed bedding, and refilled water bowls, her perfect posture slowly giving way to an exhausted slump. The first time a tiny chihuahua named Bandit mistook her designer shoe for a chew toy, she didn't flinch. She laughed, a genuine, unrestrained sound that echoed in the small kennel. It was during a particularly awkward attempt to wrangle a stubborn, slobbery mop that she first saw him. He emerged from a back room, a man wearing faded jeans, a well-worn blue t-shirt with a shelter logo, and a slightly blood-splattered lab coat that was definitely supposed to be white. He was tall, but unlike Julian, whose height was an assertion of power, this man's posture was slightly curved, as if perpetually leaning in to listen. His hair was a chaotic mass of dark curls, perpetually falling across bright, intelligent green eyes that were currently focused with intense concern on the small, whimpering bundle in his arms, a kitten wrapped in a fluffy towel. He moved quickly, his steps silent despite the heavy boots, and his hands, though clearly competent and strong, moved with a surprising, almost exquisite gentleness as he adjusted the kitten. He was talking to it softly, a low murmur of reassurance that seemed to calm the tiny creature instantly. He reached the examination room door and paused, his gaze lifting, catching Daphne mid-mop wrangle. For a moment, their eyes met across the cacophony of the shelter. His eyes widened slightly, a momentary flicker of curiosity and perhaps a touch of amusement at the sight of the obviously out-of-place woman struggling with cleaning supplies. His smile when it came was quick, genuine, and immediately drew light to the laugh lines around his eyes. It was a beautiful smile, completely unburdened by social expectation or financial calculation. "Morning, new recruit," he said, his voice deep and warm, a rich counterpoint to the kennel noises. "You look like you're winning the war against that mop. That's an old one. Sometimes she fights back." Daphne's cheeks flushed, but she found herself smiling back easily. "She's definitely winning. I'm Daphne, and I think I'm better with spreadsheets than sanitation." "Leo," he replied, adjusting the kitten carefully. "I'm the veterinarian, and trust me, I am infinitely better with a scalpel than I am with a budget. We're all a little misplaced here. Don't worry, you'll get the hang of it. Just make sure Bandit gets his water. He's a thirsty little menace." He nodded towards Bandit's kennel, and then with another gentle smile that felt startlingly sincere, he disappeared into the examination room door, the door swinging shut behind him. Daphne stood there for a beat too long, the mop forgotten. Leo. The name was simple, honest, and utterly unlike the polished, powerful names that populated Julian's world. His t-shirt was probably a promotional item, his jeans faded, and his hands were strong, bearing the evidence of manual work. He radiated a kind of quiet, genuine competence and warmth that she hadn't encountered in years. He smelled faintly of animal hair, antiseptic, and something else, something woodsy and pleasant. It was the antithesis of Julian's expensive cologne and the sterile, anxiety-laced scent of her old life. She looked down at her hands that usually navigated complex legal documents and accepted expensive jewelry. They were now holding a rough wooden handle, already acquiring a small smudge of dirt, and she felt a tiny, thrilling spark of connection. Patrice walked past, observing Daphne's sudden stillness. "Don't stand there gawking at the vet, Daphne. He's the most dedicated and the most broke man in 5 boroughs. Runs this place on fumes and goodwill. Now, get that mop under control. We've got a massive intake coming this afternoon." The words "most broke" should have been a warning. They should have sent Daphne's well-trained, society-bred mind running back to the safety of Julian's guaranteed security. Instead, they echoed in her mind like a secret, fascinating challenge. Broke, but genuine. Broke, but dedicated. Broke, but kind. Daphne grinned, picked up the mop, and plunged back into the mess. The small dog wing was cleaner, the little dogs were happier, and Daphne, for the first time, felt like she was earning her place in the world, not just inheriting it. She had found her path. A paw print pad, slightly smelly, beautiful path to self-discovery. And standing at the end of it, with kind eyes and a blood-splattered lab coat, was Leo.
Daphne's initial week at Hope's Haven was a relentless, exhausting baptism by fire. She traded her silk blouses for oversized, donated sweatshirts, and her heels for the mud-caked rubber boots Patrice had issued. She learned the distinct smell of various disinfectants, the appropriate consistency of high-calorie recovery gruel, and the subtle, unspoken language of animals in need. Her colleagues, a motley crew of devoted volunteers and overworked staff, quickly shed their initial skepticism. They saw that Daphne, despite her pristine appearance and polished accent,
didn't shrink from the hardest tasks. Her hands, once accustomed only to signing documents, became surprisingly capable at scrubbing kennels and carefully administering medication. It was a severe case, a small, abandoned beagle mix they named Barnaby that truly cemented her integration and her deepening professional and personal connection with Leo. Barnaby had been found badly injured, likely hit by a car, and required intense, round-the-clock care that stretched the shelter's already thin resources. Leo was Barnaby's primary doctor, dedicating all his spare moments to the small dog's recovery. Daphne, finding an unexpected niche for her meticulous organizational skills and boundless energy, became his unofficial nurse and aide. "The incision site looks stable, but he's still running a low fever," Leo murmured one afternoon, his brow furrowed in concentration as he gently checked Barnaby's pulse. The small examination room, usually chaotic, felt quiet and focused. Daphne was by his side, holding the beagle steady and recording data on a notepad. She watched the intense dedication etched on his face, the easy way his fingers navigated the fragile bone structure of the dog's leg. "His appetite is slightly better today," Daphne noted, reviewing the log she'd kept overnight. "He finished half the chicken broth mixture and managed 2 minutes of walking practice this morning. I think the music is helping. I put on some classical. He seems to settle." Leo glanced up, a tired but brilliant smile lighting his eyes. "Classical music, of course, only the finest for Barnaby, the former financier of the canine world. See, you're finding your talents. No spreadsheet in the world can quantify the benefit of a good Mozart track on post-operative anxiety." He was joking, but the compliment warmed her far more than any professional praise she had ever received from Julian or her former boss. Their conversations over Barnaby's recovery naturally broadened. They spoke less about medical procedures and more about life. I learned that Leo wasn't just broke because he was a veterinarian. He was broke by choice. He worked 3 jobs: the shelter, a weekend mobile clinic for low-income pet owners, and emergency overnight calls, just to manage the mountainous debt from his veterinary school and the passion projects he funded with his own money. He dreamed of opening a full-service, non-profit community clinic where no one would be turned away due to cost. He spoke of budgets and resources, but his priorities were inverted: people and animals first, profit last. "Julian would have a breakdown looking at your finances," Daphne mused one evening as they were cleaning up the recovery cages. She immediately regretted the comparison. Leo paused, his hands resting on the side of a kennel. "Julian? Your fiancé, the hedge fund manager?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable, perhaps a little guarded. Daphne sighed, leaning against the cool tile wall. "Yes, Julian. Everything in his world, everything in the world I was raised in is about optimization and return on investment. My parents look at Leo and see a poor investment. They see someone with talent who lacks ambition. Financial ambition, that is. They see a mistake." Julian's gaze softened, becoming incredibly direct and perceptive. "And what do you see, Daphne?" The question hung in the air, heavy and intimate. She looked at his tired face, the smudges of dirt on his cheek, the kindness that radiated from him like a palpable force. She saw Barnaby sleeping peacefully, breathing evenly, a testament to Leo's stubborn refusal to give up on a seemingly lost cause. "I see authenticity," she whispered. "The honesty, a painful relief. I see someone who lives by his values, not by a net worth statement. I see peace. I'm just starting to realize that peace is the most expensive thing in the world because you can't buy it. You have to earn it by being true to yourself." He pushed off the wall and stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking to a comfortable, charged space. "That's profound, Daphne, especially from someone who had the option to buy everything else. Why are you here? Truly, it's not just a break, is it?" "No," she admitted, running a weary hand through her hair. "It's an escape, but it's becoming more than that. I think I'm falling in love with the work, the genuine need, the fact that the only metric here is life and suffering. not capital gains. He nodded slowly, accepting her confession without judgment. It's addicting, isn't it? The feeling of true purpose. Look, I know our worlds are galaxies apart. Julian can give you the moon wrapped in silk. I can offer you a leaky faucet, a constant shortage of dog food, and maybe a cup of terrible instant coffee. He gestured around the slightly worn institutional room. But here, we offer hope, and that's a decent currency. The intimacy of the moment was broken by a sudden, sharp yelp from Barnaby's cage. Both of them immediately dropped their conversation and rushed to the beagle. Barnaby was struggling, his leg twitching erratically. "He's having a minor spasm," Leo stated instantly, his voice snapping back to professional calm. "Daphne, the syringe, 0.5 cc of the relaxant gently into the flank, now." In the high-stakes world of mergers and acquisitions, decisions were made in slow motion, deliberated over reports and data points. Here, the decisions were instantaneous, life and death, demanding total trust and coordination. Daphne didn't hesitate. She quickly drew the correct dosage, her hand steady despite the adrenaline rush. She found the right spot on Barnaby's flank and administered the injection with smooth, practiced ease. Within seconds, the spasm subsided. Barnaby settled back down, sighing deeply, his small body relaxing. They both sagged back against the wall, breathing heavily. The crisis was averted. Leo looked at Daphne, his eyes shining with profound relief and a new, powerful respect. "You're incredible," he breathed, the compliment raw and genuine. "That was perfect, Daphne. You have phenomenal control under pressure." "I've had a lot of practice handling high-pressure situations. Just the stakes used to be money. This feels better." He reached out and, without thinking, placed a hand on her shoulder, his thumb gently stroking the rough material of her sweatshirt. It was a simple, grounding touch, but it sent a shockwave through Daphne. It was a purely non-sexual contact, yet it was the most intimate touch she had received in years. A touch of shared stress, shared victory, and mutual respect. "Thank you," he said quietly, withdrawing his hand, but his gaze lingered. "We wouldn't be able to save dogs like Barnaby without people like you. And I don't mean the cleaning, though that is vital. I mean your brain, your precision. You're using your real power here." As Daphne walked home later that evening, her boots muddy and her sweatshirt smelling faintly of dog hair and antiseptic, she didn't feel tired. She felt alive. She pictured Leo's green eyes, the sincere thanks in his voice, and the brief, powerful warmth of his hand on her shoulder. Her world was irrevocably tipping. Julian offered a lifetime of calculated perfection and cold respect. Leo offered instant, unpredictable chaos and warm, genuine connection. And for the first time, Daphne knew which one she truly desired. She still had a diamond engagement ring on her finger, a giant, flawless rock that caught the evening light. But the only light that mattered to her now was the tired but dedicated gleam in Leo's eyes. She knew the contrast she was living couldn't last. Julian was patient, but he was not passive. The two worlds were destined to collide.
Julian had kept his calculated distance for 10 days, a strategic move designed to let Daphne's caprice, as he termed it, run its course. He knew Daphne thrived on order and planning, and he expected the unstructured reality of the shelter and the inevitable social fallout from her sudden unemployment to drive her straight back into the comforting structure of their life. His call came in the afternoon. Daphne had finally mastered the art of restraining a surprisingly strong, though tiny, Pekingese for a routine checkup. "Darling, I've given you space." Julian's voice was smooth, a low vibration of expensive cell phone technology. "The silence is appreciated, but the rumors are not. Mother is having a crisis over the guest list adjustments. We need a united front. I've booked a table at Le Monde for 8. Wear the emerald dress. It's important we appear cohesive. And leave the smell of farm at the door." The comment, delivered with Julian's customary, polite cruelty, stung.
Daphne looked down at her hands, which smelled faintly of medicated shampoo, and then at the fading bruise on her arm from a playful Great Dane puppy. She knew this was a summons she couldn't ignore. She needed to gauge Julian's true intent, and perhaps initiate the difficult conversation about the engagement itself. That evening, the transformation was jarring. Daphne traded the donated sweatshirt for the emerald silk, the muddy boots for stroppy, diamond-encrusted heels, and the smell of antiseptic for a subtle, exclusive French perfume. As she stepped into the sleek, black car Julian had sent, she felt the familiar, suffocating weight of the gilded cage descend once more. She was a flawless work of art, back on display. Le Monde was a temple of hushed whispers and spectacular wealth. The lighting was low, the cutlery was sterling, and the clientele looked exactly like Daphne's reflection, perfectly composed, impeccably dressed, and utterly detached. Julian greeted her with a practiced kiss, his lips cool and briefly touching her cheek, his eyes immediately sweeping over her to assess her presentation. "You look magnificent, Daphne. I knew a little time off would do you good." He pulled out her chair with a flourish. He had already ordered her usual wine and appetizer. Everything was exactly as it should be, perfectly orchestrated, right down to the polite, superficial conversation about the latest art auction and the political maneuvering in the city council. "The shelter is called Hope's Haven," Daphne interrupted abruptly, trying to pull the conversation into her new reality. "We had a small beagle today, Barnaby. He's recovering from a severe leg injury. It's amazing what they do with so little funding. They need a new X-ray machine desperately." Julian paused mid-sentence, his perfectly manicured hand holding a shrimp. He didn't look annoyed, he looked bored. "That's commendable, Daphne. A fascinating little distraction. Perhaps we can designate them as the recipient of the leftovers from the gala. You know, donate the floral arrangements afterward. That makes for a good press release. But darling, this is not the time or place. Tonight is about us, about stabilizing the perception of our commitment." "But Julian, it's not a distraction," Daphne insisted, her voice tight. She felt a desperate need to make him understand the depth of her shift, the genuine passion she felt. "The veterinarian there, Leo, he works non-stop. He's trying to raise the money for a community clinic where people can get affordable care for their pets. It's an essential service." He put down his fork, his eyes narrowing slightly, not with anger, but with an analyst's cold, methodical curiosity. "Right, the handsome, idealistic type, I gather. Daphne, I understand the novelty of slumming it. It's emotionally gratifying, I'm sure. But let's be rational. What is his solution to the lack of funding? A bake sale? A nonprofit clinic requires a serious endowment, a capital base, a functional business plan. I could solve his financial problems in 10 minutes with one phone call. But why would I? He lacks the necessary scale or the demonstrable return on investment." His dismissal was like a cold shower. He wasn't dismissing the shelter. He was dismissing Leo's entire existence and Daphne's genuine passion as irrelevant because they didn't operate on his financial scale. She realized Julian didn't see people. He saw assets, liabilities, and opportunities for leverage. The memory of Leo's face flashed into her mind, the tired green eyes, the smear of mud on his cheek, and the exquisite gentleness as he soothed Barnaby. She remembered their late-night conversation, his honest admission of his struggle, and the profound peace in the shelter's worn walls. The comparison was devastating. "You're right," she said slowly, picking at her perfectly prepared sea bass. "You could solve his financial problems in 10 minutes, but he wouldn't ask you to, and I wouldn't want you to. Because it's not about buying a solution, it's about building something with purpose. Julian sighed, an audible, theatrical sound of patience strained to the breaking point. Daphne, you're speaking in platitudes. This romantic notion of building something is fine for a weekend volunteer, but we have a life together, a real important life. Your mother has finalized the date for the portrait session. We need to select the venue for the rehearsals in her. You missed the initial planning meeting for the gala. I missed it because I was helping save a dog's life. Daphne cut in, her voice low but firm. The anger wasn't directed at Julian, but at the suffocating world he represented. I had Barnaby's fever log to maintain, which, frankly, felt more important than comparing 5 different shades of imported lemon. Julian leaned across the table, his expression morphing from boredom to a dangerous, possessive intensity. Listen to me, Daphne. I am indulging this meaningful phase, but your job now is to be my partner. That is a full-time commitment, and it involves appearances, logistics, and protecting our mutual interests. I don't mind you doing charity work, but you are crossing the line when it impacts our schedule and makes us look eccentric. He lowered his voice, the chill in it more potent than any shout. I bought you that apartment. I fund the life you live. Your parents expect me to ensure your stability. Do not confuse your temporary freedom with actual independence. I expect this volunteering nonsense to conclude before the engagement party. Daphne stared at the diamond on her finger, the 6-figure stone suddenly feeling like a miniature manacle. She realized the true cost of the life Julian offered, her soul, her autonomy, her right to define her own values. She suddenly felt an overwhelming, almost visceral desire to be back at the shelter, amidst the noise and the smells, where the only thing that mattered was Barnaby's next heartbeat. I won't be at the rehearsal, dinner, planning, and I won't be back on Saturday. I'll be at the shelter. And this is not a phase, Julian. It's my life. She stood up, ignoring the instant, curious attention they garnered from the surrounding tables. Julian's face was a mask of cold fury, his control finally slipping. You're making a monumental mistake, Daphne, he warned, his voice a tight coil of threat. Perhaps, she countered, picking up her small designer clutch. But at least it will be my mistake. She walked out of the opulent restaurant and hailed a cab, the emerald dress feeling like a betrayal. She pulled out her phone and sent a message, not to Julian, not to her parents, but to Leo. Is the clinic open late tonight? I need terrible instant coffee and a moment of non-judgmental peace. And maybe to check on Barnaby? A few minutes later, a reply came back, simple and immediate. Always open. Coffee's on. Daphne leaned back against the leather seat of the cab, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Julian's world was perfect, yet suffocating. Leo's world was messy, broke, and desperately hard, but it was honest. She knew where she belonged now. The contrast was too stark to ignore, and the warmth of a genuine connection was proving to be a much stronger currency than all the wealth Julian could offer. She was choosing the mud and the stethoscope over the sterling and the silk. The only question was how Julian would retaliate when he realized she wasn't coming back.
Chapter 5. When Daphne arrived back at Hope's Haven, the late hour had stripped away the daytime chaos, leaving behind a profound, almost spiritual stillness. Only the low whir of air purifiers and the soft, intermittent sounds of sleeping animals broke the silence. The scent of disinfectant was muted, allowing the fainter,
warmer smell of hay and clean fur to dominate. She found Leo in the small, cramped office tucked behind the examination room, hunched over a battered laptop, nursing a styrofoam cup of what she knew would be truly dreadful instant coffee. He looked up as she entered, and the fatigue in his eyes instantly dissolved, replaced by a welcoming warmth that felt like a physical embrace. He didn't comment on her attire, the emerald dress that screamed New York high society, nor did he ask about the fight she'd clearly just had with Julian. He simply smiled, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk, which was currently piled high with adoption applications and receipts. "I didn't expect the full gala look," he teased gently, stirring his coffee, "but I suspect the dress code tonight is come as you are as long as you promise to stop negotiating multi-million-dollar deals." Daphne laughed, a weary, genuine sound, and sank into the chair. The dress code was cohesive. I failed spectacularly. I feel like a jewel thief who forgot to change out of her uniform. She reached out and picked up a cold, half-eaten sandwich left on the desk. "Is this part of the essential services?" "Absolutely. Essential fuel for the chronically underfunded," Leo confirmed, pushing the sandwich closer to her. He fixed a cup for her, and the simple, thoughtful gesture, remembering she took it black, meant more than any expensive champagne toast. As she sipped the bitter coffee, the tense energy from the confrontation with Julian slowly began to drain away. She felt safe here, in this small, brightly lit room, surrounded by the honest, simple needs of the shelter. They spoke first about Barnaby, whose fever had dipped, a small yet significant victory. Then the conversation naturally turned personal, drawn by the quiet intimacy of the late hour. "You're running on empty, Leo," Daphne observed, placing her hand over his on the desk, a fleeting, natural connection that neither of them pulled away from. "You shouldn't be here until 2 a.m. When do you sleep? Where do you even live?" "I sleep when the animals do, which is usually around 3 a.m., and I live above the shelter in a tiny apartment the board lets me use, rent-free, in lieu of a proper salary. The roof leaks when it rains, and I've learned to coexist with a family of mice, but it's cheap and it keeps me close to the emergency calls. The reality is, every cent I earn goes back into the clinic dream. I'm trying to set up the legal structure for the nonprofit, but it's a minefield of paperwork I don't understand." "Wait, you're funding the dream entirely yourself?" Daphne asked, genuinely shocked. She knew he was broke, but she hadn't realized the full extent of his sacrifice. Julian would never risk his own capital on something so uncertain, so altruistic. "More or less," Leo admitted, shrugging. "It's difficult. I've pitched to a few foundations, but they see a single vet with massive student debt, and they just shake their heads. They want scale. They want proven financial viability. They want a Julian, I suppose, to manage the portfolio." He looked at her, his green eyes earnest. "I want to help the community, Daphne. People love their pets, but a sudden illness can bankrupt them. That's why I do this. This is my purpose." Daphne felt a powerful surge of emotion, a mix of admiration for his integrity and a sudden, sharp empathy for his burden. She knew paperwork. She knew legal minefields. She had spent her entire professional life navigating billion-dollar corporate structures and structuring deals that minimized liability. The nonprofit paperwork, the legal structuring, I could do that in my sleep. Let me help you, Leo. Not with money, with my brain. I may be a high society dropout, but I'm still a damned good consultant." Leo stared at her, the exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Daphne, are you serious? That would be a game changer. I've been floundering with the tax-exempt status for weeks." "I'm serious," she confirmed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose that surpassed anything her old career had given her. "And in exchange," she paused, taking a deep breath, the moment of vulnerability arriving like a sudden confession, You have to listen to me talk about the cage I left behind. I need someone to understand what it's like to be suffocated by perfection." Leo nodded, his expression instantly shifting from gratitude to deep concern. He took his hand back, only to place it gently over hers. This time, the contact was deliberate, an anchor of shared human experience. "Tell me," he invited softly. Daphne poured out the story she had held captive for years, the unrelenting pressure of her parents, the expectation of marrying Julian for mutual financial and social advancement, the emptiness of a life driven only by prestige. She spoke of the panic attacks, the soul-crushing boredom of social events, and the devastating realization that she didn't know the first thing about herself. She spoke of the diamond ring currently glittering on her finger, and how every time she looked at it, she felt less like a beloved woman and more like an acquired asset.
"I'm terrified, Leo," she finally whispered, the confession leaving her breathless. "Julian is kind in his own way. He's stable. He's a brilliant provider. If I break this engagement, I lose everything. My family will disown me. Julian will make my life a nightmare. But I can't marry him. I'd rather live in your leaky apartment with the mice than in that penthouse without an ounce of honesty." Leo listened patiently, his gaze unwavering, non-judgmental, and deeply empathetic. When she finished, he didn't offer advice or a quick fix. He offered validation. "Thank you for trusting me with that, Daphne," he said, his voice low and comforting. "That's a heavy burden to carry alone. You're not just leaving a life, you're leaving an identity that was forced upon you. That takes incredible courage. And the fear is real. Julian is a powerful man, but you are stronger than his bank account. You have a kindness and a brilliance that he doesn't see because he's blinded by the price tag." He squeezed her hand, a gesture of profound solidarity. "Look, I can't offer you financial stability. I can't give you a security blanket, but I can offer you the truth. If you leave Julian, you might lose your inheritance, but you will gain yourself. And you'll always have a place here. The pay is terrible, but the animals love you." Daphne smiled through a sudden prickle of tears. "That's all I need, Leo. The animals love and maybe a little help with the tax forms." They spent the next hour working side by side, Daphne's formidable mind easily structuring the complex nonprofit application documents, Leo providing the necessary technical details and heartfelt mission statements. The emerald dress and the muddy boots finally felt unified, working towards a common, worthy goal. The difference between her old life and this moment was staggering. One was about accumulating power, the other was about creating good. As the first faint streaks of dawn began to lighten the office windows, Daphne stood to leave. Leo walked her to the shelter door. The air was cool and crisp. "Thank you, Leo," she said, her voice husky with emotion and exhaustion. "Thank you, Daphne," he countered, his smile gentle, "for the structure, for the help, and for the promise of a properly filed 501c3. He paused at the door. The moment stretched thick with unspoken potential. The exhaustion, the shared vulnerability, the intimate late-night confession, all led to a single inevitable point. He didn't lean in, and she didn't move closer. They simply stood, inches apart, their eyes locked. Then, Leo reached out, his warm, rough thumb gently tracing the line of her cheekbone. It was a purely affectionate, protective gesture, without pretense or demand. "Be careful, Daphne," he murmured, his gaze falling to the expensive diamond on her hand, acknowledging the complexity she faced. "This isn't just about a career change anymore. You know that, right?" "I do," she breathed,
her heart pounding a quick, truthful rhythm against her ribs. She left the shelter, the high society gown feeling heavy and foreign, but her heart feeling impossibly light. She knew Julian was a storm she would soon have to face, but now she had an anchor, the quiet, honest certainty of Leo's love for his work, and the tentative, burgeoning love she felt for him.
Chapter 6. Julian was nothing if not persistent, and his tactics were always precise. He viewed the engagement gala, now just 10 days away, not merely as a celebration, but as the absolute, non-negotiable deadline for Daphne's charity phase. He sent her an itinerary for the week that included fittings, tastings, and a mandatory appearance at the exclusive annual Thorne Family Philanthropy Gala, which he hosted. This was his move to reestablish control, to remind her of the power structure she was trying to escape. Daphne knew attending was a strategic necessity. To refuse would be to fully sever the ties before she was emotionally ready, and before Leo's nonprofit paperwork was fully drafted. She had to attend, present a flawless facade, and use the opportunity to prove she could navigate both worlds, even if one world was quickly becoming unbearable. The night of the gala, Daphne emerged from her hotel room feeling like a highly paid impersonator. The dress Julian had selected was a structural masterpiece of midnight blue velvet, dripping with tiny, glittering diamantes that felt like armor. She wore the massive engagement ring, a glaring symbol of the life she was abandoning, and she let Julian take her arm, her smile fixed and practiced. The gala was held in a colossal, gilded ballroom, a shimmering sea of power, wealth, and orchestrated cheer. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, cool marble, and the low, confident roar of capital discussing capital. For an hour, Daphne performed flawlessly, gliding through introductions, charming Julian's investors, and accepting congratulations with practiced grace. She spoke the language of stocks, real estate, and political leverage without missing a beat, yet every word felt like a lie. She caught Julian's eye across the room. He offered a small, proprietary nod, satisfied that his asset was performing as expected. Then she saw him. Near a side entrance, looking utterly bewildered and glaringly out of place, stood Leo. He was wearing the only suit he likely owned, a slightly rumpled, dark gray jacket that looked like it had been bought off the rack years ago, and a tie that was knotted a little too tightly. He was clearly uncomfortable, constantly shifting his weight, his eyes wide as he took in the sheer scale of the opulence. Daphne's heart lurched, a violent, joyful flip. She had completely forgotten that Julian's Philanthropy Foundation routinely gave a small, token grant to a rotating list of minor local charities for tax purposes, and that Hope's Haven must have been on this year's list. Leo was here as the token representative, a man of genuine purpose, trapped in a room of ceremonial wealth. She quickly excused herself from a conversation with Julian's banker, her attention zeroing in on Leo. She moved through the crowd, the diamantes catching the light, an ethereal figure crossing a vast social chasm. "Leo, what are you doing here?" she whispered, reaching his side. He jumped slightly, startled. Then his eyes lit up with a brilliant, relieved smile that made the expensive suits around them fade into a dull background. "Daphne, I didn't think you'd see you. I guess this is where the money lives. The foundation invited us. They gave us 5 minutes and a plaque. I'm waiting for my moment to beg for a new washing machine. Honestly, I feel like a farm animal in a tuxedo." He looked absolutely charming, his dark, unruly curls refusing to be tamed by the oppressive formality of his suit. He was real, authentic, and desperately needed a new tailor. The contrast with Julian's sleek perfection was humorous and heartbreaking. "Don't beg.
Tell them about the community clinic, Daphne urged, leaning closer. Use the facts we put together in the proposal. You're talking about saving lives, not replacing a machine. You're amazing, Leo. You belong here more than anyone. I belong in a kennel with Barnaby, giving him a biscuit, Leo countered, his voice low. Daphne, you look breathtaking. Seriously, you look like you walked out of a movie set, but you also look like you're ready to bolt. I am, she admitted, glancing nervously back toward Julian's location. Julian is watching. He can't know about us, about how much time we're spending together, or what we're planning with the nonprofit. Not yet. I understand. Strategic retreat, Leo acknowledged with a faint smirk, demonstrating a surprising grasp of her high-stakes world. But listen, Daphne continued urgently, her hand briefly resting on his arm, finding comfort in the solid muscle beneath the cheap suit fabric. Julian mentioned something to me the other day. He said he could solve your financial problems in 10 minutes, but he dismissed it. I think he views the shelter's potential as leverage. Be careful what you say to anyone here. His world is all about finding the six-figure advantage. Just as Leo opened his mouth, a deep, authoritative voice cut through the air behind them. Daphne, darling, I see you found the representative from one of our valued, if slightly smaller, beneficiaries. Julian stood there, a perfectly tailored vision of controlled power. His smile didn't reach his eyes, which were cold, assessing, and utterly focused on the subtle intimacy of Daphne's hand on Leo's arm. The shift in atmosphere was instantaneous, the air growing heavy with unspoken tension. Julian, how lovely, Daphne said, smoothly removing her hand. This is Leo. He's the veterinarian, the heart and soul of Hope's Haven. I was just congratulating him on the phenomenal work they do, especially with severe trauma cases like the beagle they just saved. Julian extended a cool hand to Leo, shaking it briefly, his grip firm and condescending. Leo, a pleasure. Julian Thorne, your organization's small annual grant is managed by my foundation. Commendable work, truly. Daphne has taken quite an interest in your hobby. It's not a hobby, Mr. Thorne, Leo corrected politely, his voice calm, meeting Julian's gaze without flinching. It's life-saving work, and we're actively transitioning to a non-profit structure to scale our impact, not just our budget. Julian's smile tightened, the analyst's cold curiosity returning. A non-profit structure. Bold. And who is advising you on that complex legal infrastructure? I deal with those transitions daily. They are often an insurmountable bureaucratic hurdle without specialized, high-level counsel. The question was a trap, a subtle, sharp probe meant to expose the connection between Daphne and Leo. Daphne's breath hitched, knowing that if Leo revealed she was helping him, Julian would instantly understand the depth of her betrayal. Leo hesitated for a fraction of a second, but his answer was smooth, honest, and strategically brilliant. I'm fortunate to have the initial support of a talented, anonymous volunteer, someone who believes in the mission and is applying their skills pro bono. We're almost ready to file. Julian nodded slowly, his gaze flicking between Leo's honest eyes and Daphne's carefully blank expression. He was clearly suspicious, sensing the lie in the anonymity, but he couldn't pin it down. He saw a threat, a genuine connection that he couldn't simply buy or discard. Anonymity is how fascinating, Julian drawled, picking up a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Well, Leo, enjoy the festivities. The salmon roe canapés are quite exceptional. Daphne, we have the ambassador of Senegal waiting. Duty calls, darling. He placed a possessive hand on the small of Daphne's back, guiding her away. As they walked, Daphne risked one last look back. Leo was watching her, his expression a complicated mix of worry, admiration, and a shared acknowledgement of the danger. He raised his hand in a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, a private signal that meant, "I see you. Stay strong." Julian's grip tightened, his smooth facade cracking slightly. "I don't like that man, Daphne. Too intense. Too earnest. And anonymity is often a cover for incompetence in the nonprofit sector. I'll have my analysts run a quick report on their operations tomorrow. Just routine due diligence." Daphne's blood ran cold. Julian was investigating. The game had just shifted from polite pressure to active surveillance and intrigue. She had to act fast. She had seen the raw power of Julian's machine, and she knew it could crush Leo's fragile dream without a second thought. She had to tell Leo everything and break the engagement before Julian could weaponize the shelter's need against her. The six-figure secret was about to become the ultimate leverage.
Chapter 7. The tension from the charity gala was a cold knot in Daphne's stomach, a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that was only relieved by the daily rituals at Hope's Haven. Julian's due diligence on the shelter had begun immediately. She intercepted a few emails meant for his assistant asking for detailed financial statements and governance reports. She knew he wasn't interested in helping. He was interested in control, in finding the weakness he could exploit to pull her back into his orbit. This only reinforced her resolve. She was living on borrowed time, and she desperately needed a moment of genuine, uncomplicated connection with Leo before the inevitable storm broke. 2 days after the gala, Leo sent a text message. "Need a break from Excel and the memory of terrible Salmon Row. I know a place where the view is priceless and the attire is strictly flannel. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., meet me at the old clock tower near the river." Daphne agreed instantly. The prospect of an evening that cost nothing but time and connection was a profound relief after the exhausting pretense of the gala. She arrived at the old stone clock tower the next evening, dressed in a comfortable pair of jeans and a thick, soft sweater, the only item she had consciously purchased for herself since quitting her job. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the clean scent of the nearby river. Leo was waiting, leaning against the cold stone, looking rugged and peaceful in a heavy charcoal gray jacket. He was holding a battered thermos and a small brown paper bag. "Perfect," he said, his green eyes lighting up when he saw her. "No diamonds, no diamantes, just a woman who knows how to spot a good beagle." "And a man who looks significantly better in flannel than a tuxedo," Daphne countered, smiling widely. He led her away from the busy street and through a series of narrow, almost hidden staircases winding up the side of a tall, century-old industrial building. The ascent was slightly strenuous, but the reward when they emerged onto the flat, tar-gravel roof was breathtaking. The city, usually a suffocating presence, was suddenly transformed into a spectacular, humbling panorama. Below them, millions of lights sparkled like scattered jewels, the noise of the traffic muted into a distant, conforming roar. They were alone. Suspended between the chaos below and the vast, silent, star-dusted sky above. Daphne set down the thermos and carefully opened the paper bag, revealing 2 slightly squashed peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and a couple of bruised apples. "Gourmet dining compliments of the shelter's donation box. The coffee is my best attempt at a high-end French roast, meaning I remembered to triple the filter." Daphne took a sandwich, leaning against the parapet wall, completely content. "It's the most perfect meal I've had in months. At Le Monde, I felt sick from the sheer volume of wealth. Here, I just feel full." They ate slowly, sharing the simple food in the vast silence. Their conversation was soft, intimate, and deeply honest, far removed from the forced topics of the gala. They talked about their childhoods, Leo's, spent on a small working farm outside the city, where his love for animals took root early, and Daphne's, a constant striving effort to meet the impossible standards set by her parents. "My mother called yesterday," Daphne confessed, taking a sip of the strong, comforting coffee.
She told me that my antics were jeopardizing Julian's pending board seat, and that if I didn't stop seeing you, she actually said that poor vet, that she would cut off all communication. She said I was choosing a fantasy over my future. Leo turned to her, his gaze intense. "And what did you say?" "I hung up," Daphne admitted, the memory causing a deep pang of regret, but also a fierce pride. "I realize my future isn't defined by their approval. It's defined by what I'm building now. The nonprofit paperwork is almost done, Leo. We're going to get your clinic off the ground, and that means more to me than their entire inheritance." "Daphne, you don't have to burn your life to save mine. This is a colossal risk. Julian is going to fight dirty. He views the dissolution of the engagement as a threat to his own brand." "I know," she replied, facing him fully, "and I'm not burning my life, I'm lighting a new one. I saw you at that gala, Leo. You were uncomfortable, but you didn't back down. You spoke truth to that kind of power, even in that ridiculous suit." She reached out, and this time she initiated the contact, her hand closing over his. His hand was rough, warm, and strong, the hands of a man who worked with tools and living creatures, not ledgers and projections. "Julian offered me the moon, wrapped in silk," Daphne continued, her voice trembling slightly with the weight of her choice. "He offered me a life where every problem can be solved by a bank wire, but it comes at the cost of honesty. You offer me a leaky roof, a stack of tax forms, and a constant beautiful struggle, and you are the most honest person I have ever met." Leo's thumb gently traced the delicate bones on the back of her hand. The connection was electric, intimate, and a promise. He looked into her eyes, and all the tired exhaustion was gone, replaced by a clear, powerful affection. "Daphne, I'm falling in love with you. I know it's crazy, I know the timing is insane, and I have absolutely nothing to offer you that could compare to what Julian gives you. I can't give you security, I can only give you me. And this honest, messy, beautiful truth." Daphne felt a wave of profound, exquisite relief wash over her. She knew with absolute certainty that she loved him too. She had loved him since the moment he smiled at her with that blood-splattered lab coat, a true hero in a world of fake ones. "Your security is suffocating, Leo, and your truth is everything. I love you too." The moment was perfect. He didn't rush, he simply leaned closer, his eyes asking permission, and then he closed the small distance between them. His kiss was everything Julian's were not. Gentle, hesitant at first, then deep, warm, and utterly real. It was a kiss of shared struggle, mutual respect, and profound, honest affection. It was the moment she fully and finally chose her path. The diamond on her hand felt cold and distant, a forgotten relic of a former life. They stood there for a long time, holding each other against the cold wind, the city lights shimmering below, no longer a source of anxiety, but a silent witness to their choice. When they finally pulled apart, Leo's hand remained intertwined with his. "This changes everything, Daphne. We can't hide this. Julian will find out, and I don't have a high-powered security team to protect you." "I don't want security, Leo. I want you, and I want the work. The only way to stop Julian from using the shelter as leverage is to break the engagement on my terms, and I have to do it before he finishes his investigation. I have to go back to the penthouse and pack. It's time for the final act." The quiet peace of the rooftop had given way to a fierce, renewed resolve. The secret was out, and the love was undeniable. Now they were unified, ready to face the consequences together. They knew Julian's retaliation would be swift and severe, but for the first time, Daphne wasn't afraid.
Chapter 8. The veneer of Julian Thorne's professional calm was beginning to crack. His analysts had returned the preliminary report on Hope's Haven, and the findings,
while not alarming in a legal sense, were personally infuriating. The report confirmed the shelter was clean, struggling, and genuinely committed to its mission, with a talented but financially overextended chief veterinarian named Leo. More importantly, the report contained photographic evidence of Daphne's sustained presence there, including a blurry, long-lens shot of her and Leo sharing a moment over Barnaby's incubator late one night. The professional assessment of the shelter's liability was negligible. The personal assessment of Daphne's loyalty was catastrophic. Julian sat in his sterile, soundproof office, high above the financial district, the cityscape a meaningless backdrop to his current, focused rage. His mahogany desk was immaculate, save for the single manila folder containing the report. He wasn't angry that Daphne was volunteering. He was furious that she had committed the ultimate transgression, choosing something cheap and unpredictable over him. Her attraction to Leo wasn't just infidelity. It was a devastating indictment of Julian's entire meticulously constructed life. The report on the veterinarian's financial stability is also attached, sir. Massive student debt, 3 separate part-time jobs, owns nothing but a beat-up truck and a small apartment above the shelter. 0 assets of substance. Julian opened the section of the report detailing Leo's financials, a wry, contemptuous smile touching his lips. 0 assets of substance. Precisely. She's trading stability for sentimentality. She thinks she's finding authenticity, when in reality, she's setting herself up for financial ruin and social irrelevance. He stood, walking to the panoramic window, his reflection a perfect silhouette of cold, contained power. He ran his world on data, logic, and calculated risk. This situation required a maneuver that leveraged all 3. He couldn't just throw money at the problem. That would insult Daphne's newfound, ridiculous principles. He had to use the one thing she now genuinely cared about, Leo's dream. The upcoming engagement gala was now irrelevant. It was no longer about a party, it was about a negotiation. He had to present Daphne with a choice so clear, so rational, that her emotional folly would be exposed as simple, unsustainable immaturity. Julian called a confidential meeting with his chief legal counsel, a shrewd woman named Eleanor, who specialized in high-stakes prenuptial agreements and damage control. Eleanor, I need a detailed, ironclad proposal drafted immediately. Confidentiality level 1. It must appear entirely philanthropic and be tied directly to the continued existence of the engagement. He outlined his plan with chilling precision. He wouldn't just offer to fund Leo's dream clinic. He would offer a full 6-figure endowment, enough to wipe out the vet's debt and secure the clinic's operation for 5 years. This was the 6-figure secret, the financial leverage he could hold over Daphne and Leo. The proposal must be structured as follows, Julian dictated, his voice regaining its familiar, steady cadence. A $600,000 capital infusion to establish the Thorne Family Veterinary Community Clinic, contingent on the marriage of Julian Thorne and Daphne Hayes proceeding as planned. The funding is to be held in an escrow account, accessible upon the signing of the marriage license. If the engagement is broken by Ms. Hayes, the funding is immediately withdrawn. Make the conditions completely transparent, Eleanor. No ambiguity. Eleanor scribbled notes, her expression impressed despite the ruthlessness of the demand. You're tying the man's life work to the wedding. It's brilliant. You turn her idealism into the anchor that holds you to him. What about her reaction to the ultimatum? She values honesty, Eleanor, so I will be brutally honest. I will show her that her idealism is meaningless without the power to execute it. Leo's dream dies without my capital. Her choice becomes one man's heart or the actualization of both their ideals. It's a choice between a fantasy and a functional reality. And I know how Daphne's mind works. The commitment to the cause will outweigh the commitment to the man, especially when the man has nothing to offer but inconvenience. Meanwhile, Daphne, oblivious to the financial weapon being forged against her, was busy making her own preparations. The morning after the rooftop rendezvous, she had been a whirlwind of decisive action. She arranged for a storage unit for her clothes and possessions, and she secured a temporary lease on a charming, small apartment downtown, closer to the shelter. She wasn't just moving out, she was dismantling her life. She made a point of missing a key appointment, the final cake tasting for the gala, a non-negotiable event that her mother and Julian had planned. The resulting phone call from her mother was predictably dramatic, a firestorm of disappointment and thinly veiled threats about her inheritance. "Daphne, you have embarrassed us completely. The caterer has called Julian. What on earth is more important than our commitment to this family?" Mrs. Hayes shrieked down the line. "My mental health and my future happiness, mother," Daphne replied calmly, packing a box of old books, the only things of value she truly cared about. "Tell Julian I'll see him tonight. I have something important to discuss." Daphne's final return to the penthouse was a study in grim determination. She packed 2 small suitcases with essentials, leaving behind the vast, expensive wardrobe and the countless luxury gifts that now felt like shackles. As the sun set, she stood in the opulent living room, waiting for Julian. She looked at the perfect, meaningless art on the walls and felt nothing but cold detachment. She was ready to break the news, ready to face the consequences, and ready to choose her messy, beautiful future with Leo. But Julian was also ready. When he finally walked through the door, he wasn't furious. He was calm, composed, and carrying a sleek leather folder. His eyes, however, held a chilling intensity that was far more unnerving than anger. He didn't offer a kiss or an embrace. He simply walked to the bar, poured himself a scotch, and gestured to the folder. "Daphne, I'm glad you're here. I've done my due diligence, and I've come up with a financial model that solves both of our problems, yours, Leo's, and mine, with a single 6-figure solution. Sit down. We need to talk about what you truly value," he said, his voice dangerously even. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation, and Julian held the most powerful card, the dream of Hope's Haven.
Chapter 9. The penthouse living room, usually a haven of quiet luxury, felt like a high-stakes negotiation room. The tension was palpable. A live wire stretched between Daphne, standing resolute by her packed bags, and Julian, seated calmly with his leather folder, the instrument of his final power play. The scotch in his hand and the cold certainty in his eyes indicated he was prepared for a battle of wills, and he fully expected to win. Daphne sat down, her own composure unshaken. She needed to set the terms immediately before he could deploy his weapon. "Before you start, Julian, let me speak my truth. I'm leaving. The engagement is over. I can't marry you. I'm desperately unhappy here, and I refuse to live a lie that benefits your reputation and my family's social standing. I'm moving to a small apartment downtown, and I'm dedicating my time and my focus to helping Leo build his clinic. This is not a discussion, it's a notice." He listened without reaction, a cold, empty look in his face. When she finished, he took a slow sip of his drink and simply nodded. "I anticipated this emotional declaration, Daphne. It's dramatic, it's sentimental, and it's entirely impractical, which is precisely why I've come prepared with a rational, functional counter-offer, one that, ironically, validates your sudden, misplaced idealism." He opened the leather folder and slid a professionally printed legal document across the coffee table. The heading was stark: Thorne Family Veterinary Community Clinic Endowment Proposal. "I know what you value now, Daphne. It's not a 6-figure salary, it's purpose. And I know what Leo values, the capacity to execute his vision. This document,
He tapped the thick pages with a manicured finger. Represents a six-figure capital infusion, $600,000 to be precise. It will wipe out Leo's crushing student debt, secure the lease on his preferred facility, and cover the operating expenses for the first critical 5 years. It's a genuine foundation, not a publicity stunt. It gives him the financial viability he needs to be taken seriously by major foundations. It realizes his entire life's work, Daphne. It brings his dream into functional reality. Daphne stared at the number. $600,000. It was an astonishing sum for a small-time operation, a monumental, life-changing gift that Leo had worked years to secure with zero success. It would save the clinic and, perhaps by extension, save Leo from years of crushing financial pressure. Julian had found the one perfect piece of leverage. "What is the condition, Julian?" Daphne asked, her voice tight, the blood draining from her face. She knew it wouldn't be simple charity. "The condition is simple. The marriage proceeds as planned," Julian stated calmly, watching her reaction with clinical precision. "The funds are held in escrow. They are released immediately upon the signing of the marriage license. If you break the engagement, if you choose that poor vet's heart over his life's work, the money is immediately recalled. The project dies. Leo is saddled with debt and disappointment. You go back to your lonely little apartment, having achieved nothing but the destruction of 2 lives, mine and his dream." He leaned back, resting his arms on the back of the sofa, the victor in a negotiation he hadn't yet won. "It's a functional choice, Daphne. You sacrifice a temporary emotional infatuation with Leo for the ability to give him everything he needs to succeed. You can be the martyr for his dream, Daphne. You marry me, you maintain the security and social access that you require, and Leo gets his clinic and his freedom from debt. Think of it as a selfless, strategic transaction. You fulfill your duty, and you secure his purpose. It's the ultimate act of idealism, facilitated by my resources." Daphne's mind reeled. It was a devil's bargain, an agonizing choice designed to destroy her. Julian was forcing her to choose between the man she loved and the work that she had come to share with him. He was using her kindness and sense of duty as a weapon. If she walked away now, she would be condemning Leo's dream, and perhaps even Leo himself, to years more of crippling, backbreaking struggle. She saw the perfect logic of Julian's argument, the ruthless, cold efficiency of securing the greater good, the clinic, at the cost of a lesser good, her personal happiness. She looked at the contract, then back at Julian. His face was a mask of cold satisfaction. "You don't love me, Julian," Daphne stated, the realization hitting her with a fresh, sharp pain. "You love the idea of me, the asset I represent, the strategic partner I am, and you hate that I chose someone who values people over profit. Love is a liability in business, Daphne. I offer you partnership, stability, and the power to actually do good. Leo can give you passion, but not the power to execute. He can give you a nice, sentimental story, but not a functional, lasting legacy. Be a grown-up, Daphne. Marry the man who can ensure the dream lives, even if he doesn't share the dream." She closed her eyes, imagining a life married to Julian, attending galas, faking happiness, hiding her love for Leo, but knowing in some dark corner of her mind that she was the reason Leo was free of debt and his clinic was thriving. It was a bitter, terrifying compromise. Then she remembered the rooftop, the taste of cheap coffee, the genuine warmth of Leo's hand, and his words, "You're stronger than his bank account. You will gain yourself." She opened her eyes and all trace of doubt was gone. Julian's power was in his money, but her power was in her honesty. "You're wrong, Julian," she said, her voice clear, ringing with finality. She pushed the contract back across the table. In it seemed like a small, meaningless, glittering paperweight. "I choose Leo," Daphne declared, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. Not because of his heart, but because of his integrity. He wouldn't compromise his life for a six-figure solution, and neither will I. "The engagement is broken, Julian. Effective immediately. You lose your leverage, you lose your asset, and you lose your fiancé. But you get to keep your $600,000. Maybe you can use it to fund something that actually matters instead of using it as a weapon." Julian's composure finally shattered. His face flushed a dark, angry red, and he leaned forward, grabbing the contract and the ring. "You will regret this, Daphne. You will be alone, cut off, and facing poverty, all for a man who is a failure. You have chosen sentiment over sense, and you will pay the price." "The price of my freedom is worth it," Daphne said, standing up, finally shedding the last vestiges of her former life. She walked toward her bags. "Tell my parents what you like. I don't care. The gilded cage is empty." She left the penthouse without a backward glance. The silence she left behind was not the absence of sound, but the sound of an entire, carefully constructed life collapsing. She had nothing but 2 suitcases, a beat-up car, and the fierce, joyful certainty of her choice. Julian's cold, calculated threat had failed. Now she only had to face the consequence of her decision with Leo and the very real crisis that was about to hit the shelter.
Chapter 10. Daphne arrived at her new modest apartment, exhausted but euphoric, only to receive an urgent, frantic text message from Leo. "Major pipe burst in the kennel wing. Potential localized flooding. We need all hands on deck now. Emergency situation." The timing was either cruel fate or Julian's immediate, spiteful retaliation. She couldn't be sure, but the latter possibility sent a chill down her spine. Julian was nothing if not efficient, and a minor maintenance disaster could easily be orchestrated to cripple an underfunded organization. Regardless of the cause, the effect was immediate: crisis. Daphne didn't unpack. She threw on her muddy boots, grabbed a few towels, and raced to Hope's Haven. When she arrived, the scene was chaotic, noisy, and rapidly deteriorating. A main water pipe in the old building had ruptured violently, sending a torrent of cold water flooding the back kennel wing, where Barnaby and the other post-operative cases were housed. Leo was in the thick of it, soaked to the bone, directing the few volunteers and attempting to staunch the flow of water while simultaneously overseeing the frantic evacuation of frightened animals. His face was streaked with dirt and exhaustion, but his concentration was absolute. He didn't even notice Daphne at first. "We need more buckets. Patrice, get the electrical main shut off in this section. The crates won't fit through the front door. We need a temporary triage area." Leo shouted over the noise of the rushing water and the barking. Daphne didn't hesitate. Her years of high-stress crisis management snapped into immediate focus. She wasn't an M&A executive anymore, but her core skills, rapid assessment, delegation, and clear communication under pressure, were exactly what the chaotic situation demanded. She approached Leo, her voice cutting through the panic with surprising authority. "Leo, stop fighting the water. It's too late. We need to focus on containment and triage. I'm taking the logistical lead. You stick to the animals and the plumbing." Before he could argue, Daphne was in motion. She was completely soaked within minutes, but the rush of adrenaline and purpose was exhilarating. She identified a safe, dry corner of the main reception area as the temporary triage center. "Patrice," Daphne commanded, her voice loud and carrying, "get blankets, heaters, and water bowls to the reception area now. We need warm, dry bedding. Volunteer John, start emptying the cages from the outside in. Bring the most fragile animals, the puppies and Barnaby, to me first. Leo, focus on isolating the leak point and diverting the flow out the back door." Her former colleagues would have been astounded.
The polished, reserved Daphne was replaced by a dynamic, decisive commander using her executive skills not to make millions, but to save a handful of frightened, wet dogs. Leo paused, watching her for a brief, crucial second. He saw the cold, efficient brilliance of her mind at work, her absolute refusal to panic, and her perfect clarity in a crisis. He nodded, a look of profound trust passing between them, and instantly turned his focus back to the pipe. Daphne's corporate experience proved invaluable. She organized a human chain to move supplies, she used her quick spatial awareness to direct the placement of crates and recovery beds, and she delegated the task of calling a commercial plumbing service, something Leo hadn't even thought of yet, to a stunned teenage volunteer. She worked for 3 solid, brutal hours. She carried a heavy Labrador puppy to safety, she comforted a shivering old cat, and she finally carefully moved Barnaby, who was now resting safely in a dry crate under a warm lamp. Her expensive, soft sweater was ruined. Her boots were waterlogged, but she felt a joy and fulfillment she had never experienced closing a multi-million-dollar deal. The crisis reached its peak when the plumbers finally arrived, shutting off the main water line to the shelter. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the whimpering of the animals. The kennel wing was a disaster, but every single animal was safe, dry, and accounted for in the improvised triage center. Daphne stood in the center of the room, dripping, exhausted, and covered in mud. Leo came out of the back room, equally drenched, his clothes torn, but his face radiating relief. He walked straight up to her, ignoring the mess in the volunteers, his eyes shining with a potent mixture of gratitude, exhaustion, and love. "Daphne, you saved us," he breathed, his voice raw. "You took control. You organized the chaos. You used your high-level crisis management skills to save the animals. I was fighting the water. You were fighting the disaster. You were magnificent." She was too tired to process the compliment, but the look in his eyes was all the validation she needed. This wasn't the gentle, romantic connection of the rooftop. This was the fierce, powerful bond of comrades who had navigated a disaster together. "I broke the engagement tonight, Leo," Daphne confessed into his shoulder, the words muffled but clear. "I told Julian no. He offered $600,000 to fund the clinic if I married him. He used your dream as blackmail." "He did what?" "And you said—" "I said no," Daphne repeated firmly. "I told him that the clinic is built on integrity, not blackmail. The money is gone. We lost the capital, Leo. I'm sorry. I know how much it meant." Leo stared at her, not with disappointment, but with an overwhelming, protective admiration. He reached up, his rough hands cupping her muddy face. "You chose me, Daphne. You chose integrity. You chose the right thing, even when it cost us everything. That is worth more than every penny Julian Thorne will ever earn. We'll build the clinic slower, darling, but we'll build it honestly, and we'll build it together." He kissed her then, a long, deep kiss that sealed their bond against Julian's power and the world's expectations. The scent of mud and rescue was the most romantic fragrance she had ever known. The crisis had revealed the 6-figure secret's true price, Daphne's integrity, and she had passed the test, choosing love and authenticity over financial security.
Chapter 11. The scent of damp plaster and industrial drying fans had replaced the clinical, antiseptic smell of Hope's Haven. 2 days after the flood, the kennel wing was stripped bare, with only bare concrete and exposed piping remaining, a stark, physical symbol of the disruption Daphne had caused in 2 different lives, Julian's and now her own. Daphne sat with Leo in the small, dry office, which was currently serving as the nerve center for the entire operation. Leo's relief over the safety of the animals had morphed into a quiet, focused determination. They were broke, damaged, and facing a major rebuild,
but they were together, and they were honest. We have about a week before the temporary triage area becomes completely untenable, Leo stated, ticking items off a worn legal pad. The animals are stressed, we're out of basic supplies, and the commercial plumber's invoice is going to wipe out what little cash reserve we had left. Daphne leaned back, running her hand through her hair. She was wearing borrowed scrubs and looked more comfortable than she ever had in her designer suits. Okay, we lost the capital infusion, but we gained clarity. Julian's money was a poison pill anyway. We need to create a roadmap that gets us from where we are now, crisis management, to where we need to be, sustainable operation. She took a clean sheet of paper and began writing, naturally falling into the strategic planning mode that had defined her career. First, let's stop thinking like a shelter and start thinking like an enterprise with a unique product, Daphne said, sketching a diagram. Our product isn't just treating animals, it's the story of saving them. We need 2 immediate tracks: repair and rebuild, and revenue generation. For repair and rebuild, Daphne leveraged her old network, but this time for good. She didn't ask for money, but for expertise. She called an old client, an old-school construction executive, under the pretense of a consultation about nonprofit infrastructure. She secured a promise of discounted labor and materials, framing the project as a high-visibility, feel-good opportunity. Leo stared at the estimate she produced, $40,000 for a necessary rebuild, discounted down to $15,000, and whistled. You negotiated a 60% discount on construction in 20 minutes? It's not my best work, Daphne replied, with a wry smile, but it's a start. Now, revenue generation. We can't rely solely on donations. We need earned income. This is where Daphne's true innovation lay. She proposed a 3-pronged approach: subscription-based pet wellness, offering low-cost preventative care packages, annual exams, vaccines, basic dental, to local residents who couldn't afford expensive vet clinics, creating a steady, predictable cash flow. The Hope's Haven Founders Fundraiser, a high-end exclusive gala, the kind Daphne used to attend, but targeting her former social circle, who craved virtue signaling at a price point they couldn't ignore. The theme would be integrity over influence. The digital storytelling campaign, hiring a cheap film student secured through another quick call to create powerful short videos focusing on Barnaby and the other rescue animals, paired with a simple, direct donation platform. Leo watched her work, his earlier despair melting away, replaced by an infectious energy. He saw not a high society fiancé, but a brilliant partner capable of conquering any challenge. This is overwhelming, but incredible, Leo said, running a finger over the proposal. The wellness plan is genius. It brings money in and serves the community. But the gala? Will they even attend knowing you've completely disgraced yourself by leaving Julian? Daphne looked up, her blue eyes sharp with focus. They'll attend because they love drama and they hate being out of the loop. They'll come to see if I look miserable, but they'll stay because I'll make them look generous. And if they write a big enough check, Julian won't be able to sneer at them for supporting me. He's powerful, Leo, but shame is a far more effective motivator than ambition in that world. Leo pushed his chair back, stood up, and walked around the table to stand beside her. He put his arm around her shoulder, squeezing gently. I have the hands to fix the animals. You have the mind to fix the world around us. You were right. We're better together. We are, Daphne agreed, leaning into his touch. The office might have been small and the work ahead daunting, but the feeling of building something meaningful and true together was worth every penny she had walked away from. One more thing, Leo said, his voice dropping to a serious tone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crudely carved wooden horse, Barnaby's favorite chew toy. I don't have a massive diamond, and I don't have a contract, but I have this. It's a promise of partnership, loyalty, and a very messy future. Daphne took the worn toy, her eyes filling with tears. She didn't need a 6-figure endowment or a 20-carat rock. She just needed a piece of proof that they were fighting the same battle. "I accept," she whispered, holding the small, honest piece of wood tightly. "Now, let's get this place rebuilt."
6 months later, the gilded cage felt like a distant, unpleasant dream. Daphne was sitting in the small, sun-drenched, but perpetually damp apartment above Hope's Haven, nursing a mug of terrible instant coffee. The leaky roof, once an amusing exaggeration, had proven to be a genuine, persistent issue, requiring Leo to strategically place an assortment of buckets whenever it rained. Their life was a constant, low-grade struggle against entropy, debt, and the monumental needs of a small, busy animal shelter. And yet, Daphne had never been happier. She had leveraged her former business contacts not for acquisitions, but for donations, using her vast network and formidable communication skills to secure essential grants and material aid. The nonprofit status for the Hope's Haven Community Veterinary Clinic, which they had decided to keep under the shelter's umbrella name, was officially approved. Daphne served as the pro bono chief operating officer, managing the finances, procurement, and grant applications. Leo was the heart, but Daphne was the highly efficient, dedicated backbone. Their apartment was furnished with mismatched, secondhand furniture. Their dates consisted of split pizzas and walks through the park with the current foster dogs, and their love language was the shared exhaustion and mutual commitment to a cause greater than themselves. The only residual glamour was the faint scent of French perfume that still clung to Daphne's old jackets, a constant, humorous reminder of the life she had left behind. One quiet Saturday afternoon, they were sitting in the small, sun-drenched, but perpetually damp office, reviewing the plans for the new wing they were finally able to build, funded by a small but meaningful capital grant Daphne had successfully secured through months of tireless work. "Look at this, Leo," Daphne said, pointing to the architectural drawings. "A proper quarantine area, a dedicated surgery suite. No more emergency surgery on a borrowed table. It's happening. It's real. And we did it with honest, hard work." Leo leaned over, his arm wrapping around her shoulder, pulling her close. His worn hands rested easily on her arm. He smelled faintly of fresh sawdust and antiseptic, the smell of genuine creation. "We did it, my partner in crime and community service. You know, I sometimes look at your brain working on these projections, and I realize I got the better deal than Julian Thorne ever could have imagined. He got a reputation. I got a legacy and the love of a brilliant, fiercely moral woman. And I got a constantly leaking roof and a lifetime supply of instant coffee," Daphne countered playfully, leaning her head on his shoulder. "But I wouldn't trade it for all the chandeliers and sterling silver in Manhattan. The piece here is worth more than any 6-figure check. We are building our lives on truth, Leo. That's an unshakable foundation." Their commitment to one another, however, still needed a tangible symbol. They weren't a couple for grand gestures or society weddings. Their life was of small, meaningful connections. The moment arrived unexpectedly a week later, during a simple, late-night kennel clean. The shelter was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of contented sleeping animals. Leo paused by the mop sink, his back to her, and simply spoke into the stillness. "I can't afford a ring, Daphne. Not a diamond, not even a silver band that's polished regularly. But I want to spend the rest of my life building a home with you. A leaky, chaotic, wonderful home dedicated to doing good. Will you marry me, Daphne Hayes? Will you sign a lifetime contract of honest work and mutual exhaustion?" Daphne walked up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist, leaning her cheek against his back,
feeling the solid certainty of his presence. "I will. Absolutely. Irrevocably, yes. I don't need a ring, Leo. I need a plumber, but I'll take you first." Leo turned, his eyes shining with pure, unadulterated joy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crudely fashioned ring. It wasn't metal. It was a simple, smooth circle of polished riverstone, a quiet gray that felt comforting and earthy. "I found it by the river. It's priceless to me. It's real." Daphne took the stone ring, slipped it onto her finger, and marveled at its quiet beauty. It was a perfect contrast to the massive, flamboyant diamond she had returned. This ring was heavy with meaning, not value. They didn't have a large wedding. 3 months later, they stood in the small, sun-drenched yard of the newly repaired shelter, exchanging simple vows in front of Patrice, a handful of devoted volunteers, and an audience of their most appreciative clients. Barnaby, now fully recovered and acting as the unofficial ring bearer with a safety tether, and the rest of the happy, healthy animals of Hope's Haven. Daphne wore a simple, second-hand white dress that she had modified herself, and Leo wore a new, tailored jacket that Daphne had insisted he buy. The wedding reception was a potluck lunch in the triage area, which was now, thankfully, clean and empty. It was noisy, messy, and filled with genuine, hearty laughter. Daphne looked across the room at Leo, who was holding a slice of pizza and talking animatedly with Patrice about the next grant application. He caught her eye and sent her a private, powerful smile, a smile of shared life, shared values, and shared destiny. Daphne had walked away from a life of guaranteed millions, social prominence, and calculated perfection. She had chosen a life of financial precarity, honest work, and a profound love that asked for nothing but the truth. As she looked at the simple stone on her finger, reflecting the sunlight in the most ordinary of settings, she knew Julian's six-figure secret, the belief that everything, even love and purpose, had a price, was utterly, magnificently debunked. Love, built on integrity and shared struggle, was indeed priceless.
So, Daphne chose integrity. She walked away from the six-figure secret and the calculated security of Julian's world, proving that true purpose is always worth more than a price tag. The Riverstone ring symbolizes a foundation built not on wealth, but on honesty, shared struggle, and genuine love. She may have a leaky roof, but she finally has a home. If Daphne's journey of leaving the gilded cage and choosing a life that truly matters resonated with you, let me know. Subscribe right now to follow more incredible stories of impossible choices. Hit the like button if you believe integrity always wins over influence. And tell us in the comments below, if you were Daphne, would you have chosen the $600,000 to save the clinic or the honest love of Leo? We want to hear your choice. Thanks for watching The Six-Figure Secret. We'll see you in the next story.